The other thing that's so interesting to wrap my head around is that as a CEO of The Atlantic, while you're doing the new LinkedIn, new language, new innovations,
Yeah.
also leading this institution that is what almost 168 years old. How are you thinking about that balance personally of innovation with the preservation and integrity of this historic, over 150-year-old institution?
Yeah, that's the hardest question in my job, in my life, in my days. We have to, when people look back at my tenure at CEO of the Atlantic, right, whenever that is, whenever it ends, the question I'll be judged by is, did I anticipate where journalism was going and position the Atlantic to do well? And, there have been a lot of changes in journalism, and it's not always the case that going with the tide works, right? Going with the tide in the period of high velocity social media in, 2015 was probably the wrong move. Certainly the case that moving to paywall restricted media in 2018 is the right choice, right? Certainly is the case that, investing heavily in audio in 2014 was the right case, maybe in video was the wrong case, right? So knowing like, in retrospect is when you can see, right? And so then the question is fine, duh, Nick, you have to figure out what you're going to do with AI. And so there are a whole bunch of questions there. So there's the question of how we reach readers because the internet is transforming, Google is transforming. We're not going to be able to reach readers the same way. We also know that readers aren't going to read the same way. They're going to get news summaries from their agents, right? That'll come in a year or 2 years. It won't be people coming to theatlantic.com. And then the production of news will be different as well, right? We don't use AI to write anything, but AI is a very useful tool in reporting and research. Um, Potentially could be used in fact checking in other areas. And so figuring out those different elements, how do we reach people in a post AI internet? How do we reach people in a post, you know, Google or post Google search web world? And then how do we use AI to create content? Those are all huge questions. And we have strategies that we've defined on all three of them. Whether they'll end up being the right ones, I don't know. The larger lesson is, my hypothesis is that the closer an industry is to the training of AI, the quicker it gets turned inside out. And so engineering gets turned inside out first. Media probably gets turned inside out second. And sort of way at the end, like plumbing, right? Or like landscape architecture is like last. And so we're pretty early. Media is pretty early in the AI hurricane coming through. And we're going to see it in the next couple of years. And I need to make sure the Atlantic survives and thrives. Right now, our strategy is we're doubling down on what we do well. Right? What we do well is we do long form reported ideas driven narratives, right? And we're better than that than anybody else. And we're hiring more writers and we're doing more of them or we're setting up the infrastructure to do more of them. Part of the reason to do that is that those are the stories that are most resilient to AI. Right? Writing like summaries of other people's news, why would you have humans do that in 2025? Right? And there are a lot of websites that basically do that. And we're doing things that AI can't replicate. And so that's part one of our strategy. Part two of our strategy is to figure out as many direct ways to reach people as possible so that we don't need to rely on Google. And then another part of our strategy is to partner and work with AI companies so that we have a hand in shaping what the next version of the internet is. And so also so we've hedged our bets slightly.